I remember the exact moment everything fell apart. Not the argument, not the divorce papers, not even the day she walked out of the house. No. The moment everything actually started was a text message. Looking back, this was the moment everything changed. But when it happened, I had no idea what I was looking at. Let me explain. It was a Tuesday night, late October, cold enough that the windows were fogging slightly from the heater running inside the house. I had just finished loading the dishwasher and was sitting at the kitchen table with a beer, half watching some dumb renovation show on TV. The kind where couples argue about countertops like it's a life or death decision. Lisa had gone upstairs about 20 minutes earlier saying she had emails to answer. That was normal. She worked in marketing and her schedule was always weird. Late calls, random messages, clients in different time zones. I never questioned it. My phone buzzed against the table. Just once. That hollow vibration sound phones make when they slide across wood. I picked it up without thinking. Figured it was a group chat or maybe a work message. It was Lisa, which wasn't weird. Sometimes she'd text me from upstairs if she forgot something. I opened it, and that's when I saw the message. Tomorrow should work. He leaves for work around 11. You can come around noon. Use the side door so the neighbors don't notice. I remember staring at the screen for a second, thinking maybe she meant to text someone else about something. Work-related. Maybe a client visit or something like that. Then I kept reading. Our address is still the same. 418 Hawthorne. My stomach did this weird drop. Because why would someone need our address? But here's the thing. The message didn't stop there. Miss you. I can't wait to see you again. And that's when the room got really quiet. Not silent. The TV was still on. The dishwasher was humming. But it felt like all the sound in the house got pushed far away. I read the message again. And again. I wish I could say my first thought was anger. It wasn't. It was confusion. Like my brain was trying to assemble a puzzle and the pieces just didn't fit. Why would she send someone directions to my house? Why noon? Why mention when I leave for work? And then another message popped up. 3 little dots first. Typing. Then it appeared. Sorry, ignore that LOL, wrong person. Wrong person. I actually laughed a little when I read that. Not because it was funny. More like when something is so absurd your brain doesn't know how to process it. But here's the thing. People don't accidentally send that kind of message. Not with that level of detail. And that's when I noticed something else. Something I hadn't paid attention to at first. The contact name at the top of the conversation. Just one letter. M. No last name. No emoji. Just M. And I wish I had stopped there. I really do. I wish I had locked the phone, finished my beer, walked upstairs and asked her directly. Because what I found next was the moment the ground really started to move under my feet. But the thing that kept me awake all night wasn't the text. It was the name saved at the top of the conversation. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid there staring at the ceiling while the glow from the streetlight outside slipped through the blinds and painted these thin orange lines across the bedroom wall. Lisa was next to me, breathing slow and steady like she always did when she was deep asleep. Every once in a while she'd shift, pull the blanket closer, mumble something I couldn't quite make out. And I just lay there, staring, thinking about that one letter. M. But here's the thing. It wasn't the kind of mystery where you feel curious. It was the kind where your stomach stays tight, like your body already knows the answer but your brain hasn't caught up yet. Around 2 a.m, I picked up my phone again. I told myself I was just checking the time. That was a lie. I opened the message thread. Still there. Same text. Same stupid little wrong person LOL sitting underneath it like that somehow erased the first message. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The conversation history. Or what was left of it. Most of it was gone. Deleted. But not perfectly. There were gaps where messages used to be. You could see it in the timestamps. Long stretches of time where clearly something had been said, but nothing was there anymore. And what I found next made my chest feel tight. There were a few messages she missed when she deleted the rest. Short ones. Fragments. One said, "Tomorrow again?" Another one, "Same time as last week?" And then the one that really stuck with me. "I can't stop thinking about you." I wish I never read that, because suddenly the whole room felt different, like the air had gotten heavier. I slowly turned my head and looked at Lisa. She was asleep, one arm under the pillow, hair spread across the sheets. She looked exactly the same as she always did, but now I couldn't stop wondering, who the hell was M? And that's when something else clicked in my brain. The number. Because the name was saved as M, but the phone number was still there. I opened the contact details, and that's when I saw something strange. The number wasn't saved in her phone. Not fully. Just the letter, which meant she'd typed it in manually. That alone felt weird, but I still didn't recognize the number. So I did something I'd never done in my marriage before. I Googled it. Nothing. Then I checked Facebook. Nothing. Then LinkedIn. And that's when my stomach dropped, because the number belonged to someone who worked at her company, Mark Delaney. I sat up in bed so fast the mattress shifted under me. Looking back, this was the moment everything changed, because I knew that name. I'd met him before. Office Christmas party 2 years ago. Tall guy. Perfect teeth. One of those people who talks like he's pitching something even when he's just making small talk. I remembered him shaking my hand. "Man, you're a lucky guy," he had said, smiling at Lisa like he already knew something I didn't. At the time, I thought he was just being friendly. But here's the thing. When I looked closer at the phone bill records the next morning, there weren't just a few texts between them. There were hundreds, 3 months' worth, messages, calls, late at night, midday. But the pattern was the part that made my skin crawl. Every call, every message, every single one happened while I was at work, like clockwork. And that's when I realized something that made my chest go cold. If the text said he could come over at noon, that meant he'd probably already been here before, more than once. So the next afternoon I did something small, something simple. I told Lisa I forgot my wallet and needed to swing home for it. She didn't even look up from her laptop when she said, "Yeah, sure, it's on the counter." But when I pulled onto our street 10 minutes later, my hands tightened around the steering wheel, because parked 2 houses down from mine was Mark Delaney's car. And that's when I saw it, my front door opening. But the thing that stopped me from walking inside wasn't fear. It was the realization that I suddenly had a much better idea. I sat there in the car with the engine still running, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were starting to turn white. The dashboard clock said 12:14 p.m. My heart was beating way harder than it should have been for a normal Tuesday afternoon. 2 houses down. That's where Mark's car was parked. Dark gray BMW. I remembered it from the company Christmas party because he had made a big deal about it in the parking lot, talking about horsepower and leather interiors like anyone actually cared. And now it was sitting there, quiet, like it belonged on my street. I remember staring at it and thinking, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's visiting someone else. Maybe this is just some weird coincidence. But here's the thing. Mark lived across town, 20 minutes away. There was absolutely no reason for him to be parked on my street in the middle of a workday. Unless, well, you know. I leaned forward in my seat and looked down the road toward my house. And that's when I saw it. My front door opening. Just a few inches at first. Then wider. And Mark Delaney stepped out like he owned the place. Tall guy. Same expensive haircut. Same confident way of walking I remembered from that Christmas party. Like the whole world was a room he'd already decided he belonged in. He didn't even look around. Just stepped onto the porch, stretched his arms like he'd just woken up from a nap, then walked down the steps. I swear my whole body went cold. I wish I had stopped there. I wish I had just driven away. Because what I was about to realize next, that was the moment my brain really started connecting the dots. Mark didn't hurry. That's the part that stuck with me. He wasn't sneaking. He wasn't nervous. He walked down the sidewalk casually, like he'd done it 100 times before. And that's when something inside my chest twisted. Because people don't move like that unless they're comfortable. Unless they've been somewhere. A lot. He reached his car, unlocked it, tossed something onto the passenger seat, then got in and drove off like it was just another day. And the whole time I just sat there watching. Engine idling, hands shaking slightly. Looking back, this was the moment everything changed. Because right then I had two choices. I could storm into the house, kick the door open, start yelling, demand answers. Trust me. I thought about it. I imagined Lisa's face when I walked through that door. I imagined Mark still being inside. But here's the thing. Something stopped me. And it wasn't fear. It was a different feeling. A colder one. Because if Mark was coming over while I was at work, that meant this wasn't the first time. Not even close. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. He didn't park in front of the house. He parked 2 houses down, which meant they'd thought about this, planned it, done it enough times to know where to leave the car so the neighbors wouldn't notice. I leaned back in my seat and just stared at the house. My house. The one I'd spent 6 years paying for. The one we painted together the first summer after moving in. And now some other guy was walking out of it in the middle of the day. The anger hit then. Hot. Fast. Like someone had poured gasoline into my chest. But I didn't move. Because what I found next, that was the part that really made me pause. About 10 minutes later, the front door opened again. Lisa stepped outside. She looked around quickly. Left. Right. Then she pulled her phone out and started typing something. I couldn't see the screen, but I could guess what the message probably said. And that's when something strange happened. Instead of marching up to the house, instead of confronting her, I suddenly realized I had a much better idea. Because if this had already been happening for months, then I didn't just have a problem. I had time. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. If Mark was comfortable enough to leave my house like that, then he'd probably been inside it more times than I could count. And if that was true, there was a very good chance he'd be back again. Soon. But the worst part wasn't the cheating. The worst part was what I would discover they were planning next. I drove around the block 3 times before I finally pulled away from the street. Not because I was lost, because I was trying not to lose my mind. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around it and kept pulling. Every time I blinked, I could see the same image replaying in my head. Mark Delaney walking out of my front door like it was just another casual afternoon. I kept hearing his voice from that Christmas party 2 years earlier. Man, you're a lucky guy. Yeah. Looking back, that line hits a little different now. I ended up parking in a grocery store lot about 10 minutes away. Just sat there with the engine off. The smell of hot asphalt coming through the cracked window, the faint sound of shopping carts rattling across the pavement. And that's when the anger really hit. The kind that makes your fingers twitch, because part of me wanted to drive straight back home, kick the door open, throw Mark through a wall, demand answers from Lisa right there in the kitchen. I could picture it perfectly, her shocked face, his stupid smirk disappearing. But here's the thing, that would have ended the story right there. And I wasn't ready for what came next, because the more I thought about it, the more something started to feel off. Too smooth, too practiced. Mark didn't act like a guy sneaking around. He acted like a guy who had done that walk many times before. And that's when something clicked in my head. If this had been going on for months, then there were probably patterns, schedules, habits, and habits leave evidence. Looking back, this was the moment everything changed. because instead of confronting them, I decided to watch. The next day after work, I stopped at an electronics store. Nothing fancy, just a couple smart cameras and a door sensor system, the kind people install when they want to check on packages or see who rings the doorbell. Totally normal, totally legal. And the best part? Lisa never noticed. That evening, while she was upstairs on another client call, I installed one camera facing the side door, the same door she had mentioned in that text, the one where Mark was supposed to come in. When the camera powered on, the little blue light blinked twice. I remember staring at it thinking, all right, let's see what's really been happening. And that's when the waiting started. Days passed, normal days, breakfast together, work, dinner, small talk about bills and groceries like we were just another boring married couple. But inside my head, everything had changed. Because every time my phone buzzed, I checked the camera logs, and what I found next made my stomach twist. The first alert came on a Wednesday, 12:07 p.m. Motion detected. I opened the app. There it was. Mark. Same confident walk. Same stupid BMW parked down the street. He walked right up to the side door like he had a key, and Lisa opened it before he even knocked. I stared at that screen for a long time, long enough to feel something inside me go completely numb. But here's the thing. That wasn't the only visit. Over the next 2 weeks, the camera recorded 6 more. 6. All during the same window, late morning, right after I left for work. Same door, same routine, like clockwork. I wish I never kept watching, but once you start pulling a thread like that, you can't stop. And that's when something even worse happened. One night, Lisa was on the phone in the living room while I was in the kitchen pretending to scroll through emails. I wasn't even trying to listen. But then I heard something that made me freeze. Her voice dropped lower, like she didn't want me to hear, and she said something that made my blood run cold. Once the house sells, everything will be easier. I stopped breathing for a second. The house. My house. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just an affair. They were planning something bigger. And what I discovered next made the cheating look like the least painful part of the whole story. I didn't move when I heard her say it. I just stood there in the kitchen holding my phone, pretending to scroll through emails while the sound of her voice floated in from the living room. Once the house sells, everything will be easier. The words landed in my chest like a brick. For a second I thought maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she was talking about some client or a friend, or literally any other house in the world. But here's the thing. Lisa never talked about selling our house. Ever. This place wasn't just where we lived. It was the place we spent 2 summers fixing up. New floors, fresh paint, the stupid herb garden she insisted on planting even though neither of us cooked enough to justify it. So hearing her say that, quietly, like it was already decided, yeah, that did something to me. I stayed perfectly still while she finished the call. Yeah, I know, she said softly. Just give it a little more time. Once things are in motion, it'll all make sense. Then a pause. Then she laughed. Not nervous laughter, comfortable laughter, like she was talking to someone she trusted. And that's when I felt that cold feeling again. The one that had started the day I saw Mark walk out of my front door. Because suddenly the cheating wasn't the biggest problem anymore. The house was. That night I barely spoke during dinner. I kept my head down, pushed food around my plate, nodded at the right moments while she talked about some marketing campaign at work. I kept replaying that sentence in my head. Once the house sells. After she went upstairs, I stayed at the table a while longer. The kitchen smelled faintly like garlic from dinner, and the dishwasher hummed quietly in the background. Normal house sounds. But the house didn't feel normal anymore. And that's when I did something I hadn't done yet. I opened our shared documents folder. You know the one. Every couple has one. Taxes, insurance papers, mortgage stuff. I typed house into the search bar. A few files popped up. Mortgage statements, insurance renewals, boring stuff. But what I found next made my pulse jump. A document I didn't recognize. A realtor contact form, submitted 3 weeks earlier, Lisa's name, Lisa's phone number, and the message field said, "Interested in discussing selling property within the next few months." I leaned back in my chair slowly. 3 weeks. 3 weeks she'd been talking to a realtor, and I had no idea. Looking back, this was the moment everything changed, because suddenly the whole situation looked different. This wasn't just an affair. This was an exit plan. And that's when another piece clicked into place. That text she sent Mark, the one with our address. At first it didn't make sense. Why would he need directions to a house he'd clearly already been visiting? But now it made perfect sense. Mark didn't just want to visit. He wanted to move in. I wish I never had that realization, because suddenly I could picture it. My house, my driveway, my living room, and Mark Delaney walking around inside it like it belonged to him. That thought made my stomach twist. But here's the thing. There was one detail Lisa clearly hadn't thought through. And that's when I started to smile for the first time in weeks. Because the house, legally speaking, it wasn't hers to promise, not even close. I bought it 3 years before we got married. The title was in my name, only mine. And Lisa had never once bothered to check, which meant something very important. If she and Mark were planning their happy little future here, they were building it on a lie. But I wasn't done yet, because the next step I took would make this whole situation a lot more interesting. And the funniest part? Mark Delaney was about to walk straight into it. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning I called in sick to work. Not because I was actually sick, because my brain wouldn't shut up. Every thought kept circling back to the same thing. The house. Lisa talking to a realtor. Mark showing up like he already lived there. That text message with our address like it was some kind of invitation. So instead of going to the office, I drove downtown. There's a little law firm a few blocks from the courthouse. Nothing fancy. Old brick building, dusty plants in the lobby, the faint smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. The kind of place where people go when they need paperwork handled quietly. And that's when I sat down with a lawyer. His name was Alan. Late 50s, thin glasses, calm voice. The kind of guy who listens more than he talks. I didn't start with the affair. I just told him the facts. "I bought the house before we got married," I said. "Title's only in my name. No joint ownership." He nodded slowly and flipped through the documents I brought. "All right," he said. "And what exactly are you worried about?" I hesitated for a second. Then I said it. "My wife might be planning to sell the house." Alan actually chuckled a little at that. Not in a rude way, just amused. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "she can't." Just like that. 2 words. Can't. And that's when I felt this strange wave of relief roll through my chest. "But here's the thing," he continued, holding up a finger. "She could still cause problems. If she thinks she's entitled to part of the value during divorce proceedings, that turns into a different conversation." Divorce. Hearing that word out loud felt strange, like suddenly the situation had crossed some invisible line. I stared down at the desk for a moment. Then I told him everything. The text message, Mark, the camera recordings, the realtor form. Alan didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he tapped the desk lightly with his pen and said something that stuck with me. "If you confront them now, this turns emotional, messy, unpredictable." He paused. "But if you wait and document everything, you control the situation." Looking back, this was the moment everything changed, because until that meeting, I was still reacting. After that, I started planning. Alan explained exactly what I should do. Save the recordings. Log the dates. Don't change behavior. Don't tip them off. Let them think everything is normal, he said. People reveal a lot when they believe they're safe. So that's exactly what I did. I went home that afternoon like nothing had happened. Lisa was in the kitchen cutting vegetables when I walked in. The smell of onions filled the air. "Oh, hey," she said casually. "I thought you were at work." "Left early," I replied. "Slow day." She smiled, that same smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. But now it looked different. Fake. That night we sat on the couch watching TV like always. At one point she leaned against my shoulder and said, "You've been stressed lately. You should take a weekend off or something." And that's when something strange happened. Instead of getting angry, I almost laughed, because she had no idea how right she was. Over the next week I played the part perfectly. Normal husband. Normal routine. Meanwhile, the camera logs kept filling up. Mark, Tuesday, Thursday, then again the following Monday. Same door, same time, like clockwork. But here's the thing. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I understood the whole situation, the cheating, the house, the plan. I wasn't ready for what came next. Because 2 nights later, Lisa said something at dinner that made my stomach drop. She put her fork down, looked at me casually and said, "Hey, I was thinking maybe we should invite Mark out for drinks sometime." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," she said, shrugging. "You two barely know each other. I think you'd get along." And that's when I realized something terrifying. Mark Delaney wasn't hiding from me anymore. He was about to sit across from me at a table and smile. The night we met Mark for drinks, I almost canceled 3 different times. Not because I was scared of him, because I was scared of myself. There's a very specific kind of anger that builds when you know the truth, but the other person doesn't know you know. It sits in your chest like pressure, like shaking a bottle and holding the cap closed. That's how I felt walking into that bar. It was this little place downtown Lisa liked. Dim lights, wooden tables, that smell of beer and fried food that sticks to your clothes for hours. The kind of place where conversations get loud and nobody really pays attention to anyone else. Mark was already there. Of course he was. Sitting at a corner table with a drink in front of him like he owned the place. And that's when I saw the same thing I'd noticed the day he walked out of my house. Confidence. That guy had it in ridiculous amounts. When we walked up, he stood and stuck out his hand. "Daniel, right?" he said, smiling like we were old friends. "Good to finally hang out." I shook his hand. Firm grip. Too firm. "Yeah," I said. "Lisa's mentioned you." Which wasn't exactly a lie. Lisa slid into the booth beside him while I sat across from them. And that's when something weird happened. She didn't sit next to me. She sat next to him. Close enough that their shoulders brushed when the waitress came over. I wish I never noticed that. Because once you see things like that, you can't unsee them. The waitress dropped off 3 beers and Mark raised his glass. "To good company," he said. I lifted mine. But here's the thing. I was studying him. Every little movement. How comfortable he looked. How easily he leaned back in his chair like he belonged there. Like he belonged everywhere. "Lisa says you work in finance," he said to me after a minute. "Yeah." "Man, I could never do that," he laughed. "Too many numbers." "Marketing's easier?" I asked. He grinned. "Oh, yeah. We just convince people to buy stuff they don't need." Lisa nudged him playfully. "Don't listen to him," she said. And that's when something inside my chest tightened, because that little moment felt intimate, too comfortable, too practiced. Looking back, this was the moment everything changed, because Mark wasn't nervous. Not even a little. He didn't act like a guy secretly sleeping with someone's wife. He acted like a guy who had already won. At one point, he leaned forward and said something that made my blood run cold. "You know," he said, pointing at me with his beer, "Lisa's one of the smartest people I know. Honestly surprised you keep up with her." He laughed like it was a joke. Lisa laughed too. But here's the thing. There was something underneath it. A little edge, like he was testing me. And that's when I realized something. Mark thought I was stupid. He thought I had no idea what was going on, which meant he felt safe. And safe people talk. They slip. They reveal things. So I played along. I laughed, told a couple work stories, even clinked glasses with him when he ordered another round. The whole time Lisa kept watching both of us like she was waiting for something to explode. But it didn't. Not that night. After about an hour, Mark leaned back in his chair and said something that stuck with me. "You'd be surprised how fast someone can replace you," he said casually, swirling his drink. "Life moves quick." He looked right at me when he said it, just for a second, long enough for the message to land, and that's when I smiled, because he thought that line was a threat. But the truth? It was the most accurate thing he'd said all night. "You're probably right," I said, raising my glass. Looking back now, Mark had no idea how right he was about that. And the funniest part? Neither did Lisa, but the trap I was setting was almost ready. They just didn't know they were both already standing in the middle of it. The trap didn't happen overnight. It took patience. A lot more patience than I thought I had. But here's the thing. Once you stop reacting emotionally and start thinking a few steps ahead, everything changes. Every move matters. Every detail becomes a piece on the board. And by that point, I had plenty of pieces. Camera logs, dates, times. Video clips of Mark walking through my side door like it was his second home. Looking back, this was the moment everything shifted from suspicion to certainty. And once you have certainty, you can start planning. So one morning at breakfast, I casually said something that changed everything. "I might have to travel next week," I told Lisa, stirring my coffee like it was no big deal. She looked up immediately. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah," I shrugged. "Work thing. 2 days, maybe 3. And that's when I saw it, just for half a second. Excitement. She hit it fast, took a sip of coffee, nodded like she was thinking about something else. But I caught it, and that's when I knew. The trap was set. The following Tuesday, I packed a small overnight bag and tossed it in my car while Lisa stood in the doorway watching. "You sure you don't want me to drive you to the airport?" she asked. "Nah," I said. "It's just a quick flight." Technically, that wasn't a lie. I did leave the house, but I never got on a plane. Instead, I drove 15 minutes across town and checked into a cheap hotel off the highway, the kind with buzzing hallway lights and carpet that smells faintly like cleaning chemicals. I dropped my bag on the bed, sat down, and opened the camera app on my phone. The house looked quiet, normal, kitchen empty, living room still. For a moment, I almost convinced myself nothing would happen. Maybe they'd wait. Maybe I'd misjudged the timing. But here's the thing. People get careless when they think the coast is clear. And that's when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Side door. 12:03 p.m. My chest tightened as I tapped the notification. The camera feed opened, and there he was. Mark. Same BMW parked down the street. Same confident walk up the side path. He didn't even hesitate. Just knocked once. The door opened immediately. Lisa pulled him inside. I sat there on that ugly hotel bed staring at the screen while the sound of my own heartbeat thumped in my ears. I wish I could say I felt angry, but honestly, I felt calm, cold, calm, because this time, everything was documented. Every step, every minute. And that's when I did the next part of the plan. While they were inside my house thinking they were alone, I opened my laptop and emailed the footage to my lawyer. Timestamps, dates, all of it. The subject line was simple. Documentation. What I found next was almost surreal. About 2 hours later, Mark walked out again, stretching his arms like he'd just taken a nap, exactly the way he had the first time I saw him. Looking back, that little routine of his actually helped me, because it made the pattern undeniable. But here's the thing. By the time he left the house that afternoon, the paperwork had already started. Divorce filing, evidence attached, property ownership documented, everything Alan had told me to prepare. And Lisa had no idea. She thought she was winning, thought she had the house lined up, thought Mark was her ticket out. But I wasn't ready for what came next. Because the person who reacted first wasn't Lisa. It was Mark. And what he did next changed the entire story. I was still sitting in that cheap hotel room when the first phone call came in. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand while the air conditioner rattled in the background and that weird lemon cleaner smell hung in the room. I figured it was a telemarketer or something. But here's the thing. Something in my gut told me to answer. So I did. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, just breathing for a second. Then a voice I recognized immediately. Daniel. Mark. My stomach tightened, and that's when I realized something. He knew. I sat up a little straighter on the bed. Mark, I said calmly. What's up? There was another pause, longer this time. You filed for divorce, he said. Not a question. A statement. So my lawyer had already contacted them. Faster than I expected. Looking back, this was the moment everything shifted. Because the tone in Mark's voice wasn't confident anymore. It was sharp, tight, like someone trying very hard not to panic. Well, I said slowly, that's between me and my wife. Another silence. Then he said something that made my eyebrows lift. Lisa told me the house was hers. I blinked. What? You heard me? He snapped. She said you were the one living in her place. And that's when the whole situation twisted in a way I hadn't expected, because suddenly it wasn't just me being lied to. Mark had been lied to as well. I leaned back against the headboard and let out a slow breath. But here's the thing, I said. You might want to check the property records. Silence. Heavy silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. Then he spoke again. You're saying she doesn't own it? Not even a little. I heard something crash faintly in the background on his end, like a chair being shoved back. I moved money already, he muttered. That line made my chest tighten. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. And that's when I realized something else. Mark hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been planning a future with her, a future inside my house. And apparently, he'd invested in that idea. I need to talk to her, he finally said. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long moment. I wasn't ready for what came next, because about 2 hours later my phone started exploding with notifications, messages, emails, even a call from Alan. When I answered, his voice sounded calm but serious. You might want to check social media, he said. What happened? Your wife and Mark work at the same company, correct? Yeah. Then you should know their HR department just got involved. And that's when I opened my phone. There it was. A screenshot someone had posted online. An internal email from their company. Subject line: Immediate investigation. Workplace conduct violation. Apparently someone had reported the relationship, the affair, the fact that it had started while they were both managing the same client accounts, which meant company policy had been broken. Badly. I leaned back slowly and stared at the ceiling, because the fallout was happening faster than I expected. Mark losing his job suddenly made a lot of sense. Investors pulling away. Lisa's reputation at work collapsing overnight. All because they thought they were building something secret. But here's the part I didn't see coming. That evening Lisa came home, and the first thing she said when she walked through the door was, "I know you knew from the beginning." The front door clicked shut behind her, and the house felt different immediately. You know how a place can feel the same for years, and then suddenly it doesn't? Like the air itself has changed. That's what it felt like. Lisa stood in the entryway with her purse still hanging off her shoulder. Her hair was messy, her makeup slightly smudged like she'd been crying or rubbing her face all day. And the first thing she said was exactly what I heard on the phone earlier. "I know you knew from the beginning." I didn't answer right away. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten dinner 1,000 times. The overhead light buzzed softly above us, and the faint smell of coffee still hung in the air from earlier. Looking back, this was the moment everything finally stopped being a secret. She walked a little closer. "How long?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired. I leaned back in the chair and folded my arms. "Since the text." And that's when her shoulders dropped, like a weight she'd been holding up finally slipped. "That night?" she said quietly. "Yeah." She let out this long breath and ran a hand through her hair. "I knew it," she muttered. Then she sat down across from me. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of a car passing outside. And then she said something that honestly surprised me. "Mark thought the house was mine." I nodded slowly. "I know." She stared at me. "You told him?" "No," I said. "Property records did." For the first time all evening, I saw something close to panic flicker across her face. "But here's the thing," I added quietly. "You told him we'd sell it." She didn't answer. Didn't deny it either. Looking back, this was the moment everything finally made sense. She hadn't just been cheating. She'd been planning a life after me. A clean exit. Mark. The house. A fresh start. Except the whole plan was built on something that wasn't true. And once that lie cracked, everything collapsed. "I didn't think you'd find out," she said finally. I actually laughed a little. Not because it was funny, because the whole situation felt surreal. "You literally texted me instructions for your affair," I said. She closed her eyes for a second. "I know." And that's when the silence hit again. Heavy. Final. A few weeks later, the divorce was official. No screaming courtroom drama, no huge fights, just paperwork. Cold, boring paperwork. The house stayed with me. Legally, it had never been hers in the first place. Mark lost his job not long after the company investigation started. Apparently, their relationship violated several policies tied to shared clients. Last I heard, he moved to another city. Lisa moved into a small apartment across town. I saw her once after everything was finished. Pure coincidence at a grocery store. We nodded politely like strangers who used to know each other. And that was it. But here's the thing that still sticks with me. None of this would have happened if she had just checked the name before hitting send. That one text message. 4 lines. That's all it took. If she'd sent it to Mark like she meant to, I might have never known. And sometimes I sit in my kitchen, in the house she thought she was giving away, and I think about that moment. The vibration of my phone sliding across the table, the screen lighting up, and the message that changed everything.